Hello everybody, I'm opened up to the remaining lecture slides that we didn't get to finish last Monday, covering the chapter on learning, which was chapter 5. We left off talking about cognitive learning, and then we hadn't yet gotten to observational learning. So I just wanted to run through these slides with you quickly and give you an overview of each one. And then you can just watch and listen on your own time. So we ended lecture on this material. We were talking about insight and we were talking about Kohler. We watched the Men in Black clip. A part of this falls into the category of cognitive learning, where we learn and we store the information we learn, and it can tend to dictate our future behavior, not necessarily in a mechanistic way like we saw with the behavioral conditioning of Pavlov, and even operant conditioning where you're learning from reward punishment contingencies, but where you're actually learning via your expectation. Our expectations can cause us to behave in ways that are often contingent upon the consequences that follow. So a researcher by the name of Seligman and Meyer, two researchers, wanted to apply those findings in a way that made sense to describe human behavior and human learning. So what they did is they actually started out with a situation, an experiment where they used dogs. And they put dogs in this kind of contraption here that you see the graphic of, where the grid below was sort of like an electrical grid. It gives a shock similar to a shock collar would for a dog. And what they did is, they just looked to see, like, if we shock the dog here, what's he going to do? Well, he's going to jump over here. Okay. If we shock the dog over here, what's he going to do? Well, he's going to jump over here. What if he starts to only get shocked over here? He's going to keep jumping back over here. The dog quickly learns, like, when I do this, this happens. It seems similar to the pigeons and what Skinner did. But basically, he's learning, the animal is learning how to escape a situation based on a history of repeated failure. So if I keep jumping over here and I get shocked, I'm going to, learn very quickly that I need to be over here. But what happens when both sides provide a shock? And the animal is then incapable of escaping that shock. What then is their behavior? When they quickly learn that, hey, nothing I do makes a difference or matters, then the animal gives up. And that's what we saw happen in the Seligman and Meyer experiments, is the animal would actually just lay down on the grid and sort of give up. Well, they quickly took these findings and likened it to humans, asserting that the development of depression in humans is often a process that's very similar to that of the learned helplessness that they saw in the dogs that they were working with. In both situations, there's passivity, there's giving up and just sitting there, there's lack of aggression, slowness to learn that a certain behavior is successful, and there's social withdrawal in both situations. So both the helpless dog and depressed humans learn from specific past experiences that their actions are useless, which can often perpetuate the cycle of depression and or learned helplessness. So in dogs, it was learned helplessness, and in humans it's depression, but depression is kind of a learned helplessness. The dog is unable to escape the shocks no matter what it did, while humans have no control over certain events in their lives, like death of a loved one, an abusive parent, the loss of a job, or serious illness. And when those situations come upon us and we think, well, I have no control, this just happened to me, there's nothing I can do about it. In health psychology, this is actually something that comes up, and we call it a learned helplessness. We learn very quickly that I can't stop said things from happening, so I just give up. This is where we find a lot of depression seeping in for people. Okay, we're going to move now into observational learning, which is learning a new behavior by watching a model that behavior. And the model can be anyone really, but it has more power obviously when it's somebody that is an important other in our lives. So when we're children, the models who are important others would be parents or teachers or other adult figures. As we grow into adolescence, it may still be those individuals, but it may also now be peers or people I see as equal friends and such. So the big name in this area is Bandura. You guys know this because you all looked at the Bobo doll study for your homework. He was a big proponent of children specifically learning through imitating. And watching other people receive rewards and punishments for their behavior, and then changing or molding their behavior in a fashion that went right along with the model. And we saw that in the Bobo doll study, where, once children saw how the adult interacted with the Bobo doll, they followed suit, right? So they were much more likely to be aggressive when an adult was aggressive with the doll. They were more novel with their aggression. Once they'd seen an adult do that, it was almost as though they had permission to act in such ways. So in this experiment, the key thing that we find is that exposure to things like aggression and violence can alter the brain and our behavior. And we learn specifically about that relationship, that correlation between, say, for example, violent video games and behavior in children and how they're linked. Bandura contributed to our understanding of aggression and the different ways that children are exposed to aggression, that it's often through modeling, that they're not taught to be aggressive per se. Certainly no parent tells their children that violence is the answer, I hope. But they learn a lot, and oftentimes we hear more is caught than taught. Children will watch to see, well, what does my parent do when my parent gets mad? When somebody else offends my parent or upsets my parent, what is their reaction? How do they treat them? And so while a parent may be telling a child verbally, hey, when you get mad at somebody, it's not okay to hit them. But then when they themselves get mad at someone who cuts them off in traffic, they result to a violent reaction. Or, somebody in their life doesn't do something they like and they result to an aggressive reaction. That child sitting there and watching and sponging it up and kind of storing that in the cache of their brain of how to react and what to do when I'm upset. And that's going to matter much more than anything a parent could verbally tell their child. So I just want to make sure you're understanding Bandura's design, because it's a pretty great example of an experimental design. He had a control group where no model was seen amongst the kids. And then he had different independent variables, which were the type of model was one IV. Did they watch an aggressive model or did they watch a non-aggressive model? Another IV was the gender. Well, were they watching an aggressive male or female model or a non-aggressive male and female model? These are 4 different conditions here. And then another IV even further is gender of the child. So did male and female children react differently upon seeing a male or female model being in the aggressive or non-aggressive condition? So it just kind of shows you a breakdown of those IVs. There were 3 IVs, and the overarching thing that was being measured, the dependent variable, was how aggressive would the children be, right? So looking for their actions and their types of interaction with the Bobo doll, and how aggressive was that? And that's going to be compared to, their gender, the model's gender, and the type of model. So that's the basic design. It's such a good one in terms of an example for kind of what to be paying attention to in an experimental design. Now, so what were the effects of all of this research? You know, we talk about Bandura being kind of one of the biggest names in the area of observational learning. Well, what he gave us really was the underpinnings for then what future researchers took to investigating the effects of TV, internet, and video games as being powerful sources of observational learning. So that's like saying, well, no longer is it just parents, teachers, and peers. No. Our kids are now learning really and growing up with television, internet, video games as primary sources of watching how conflict is handled, how people treat one another, oftentimes, as you know, in our media, in very violent ways. So this was a video, short clip I was going to show you looking at aggressiveness in video games, and it was actually done with adults. So this is pretty powerful because it's not just kids that learn this, but prolonged exposure to violence via video games, specifically here, desensitizes its viewers, right? So that they're seeing violence all the time as sort of the answer, how you solve problems, how you treat others. And what happens is they start to become indifferent to it later when they view a fight break out, or they see it again on TV, or they see it in reality. They tend to become indifferent because it's kind of like, oh yeah, seen that before, been there before, it's no big deal now. So we see this desensitization occur after continued viewing of these types of situations. And we see that adults are privy to it just as much as kids, especially when we start talking about certain violent content that is geared towards adults. Different types of aggression, road rage, sexual aggression that could be shown in adults, and they're very prone to that. But in kids, it could also, convey different messages, like bullying is an effective way to control others. Oh, when you bully, you get what you want, you're on top, and various other messages that could come along with that of what men and women should be like. We take our cues from watching in this regard to the things that we're seeing on TV and in the media and so forth. So to kind of turn that's the negative effects of that, but to turn it around, this could really be used in a positive way, in that if we were promoting more positive models, that's what our kids would be seeing. So models are most effective when their actions and words are consistent. When exposed to a hypocrite, children are going to imitate that hypocrisy by doing what the model did and saying what the model said. Observational learning of morality issues begins very early in life. Knowing what's right and what's wrong comes from watching others. So socially responsive toddlers who readily imitate their parents tend to become preschoolers with a strong internalized conscience. So it's like, I watched and I saw what was right and what was wrong, and I did that from an early age, and that's going to become part of now what makes up my conscience, that tells me what's right and wrong in certain situations. And we see models that demonstrate this very much so in shows like Sesame Street. Lots of pro-social models and helping behaviors, and unfortunately, we're just not seeing that enough. There aren't enough shows like that teach kids proper conflict resolution, how to talk to people, how to interact, how to accept differences, how to behave when someone makes you mad or steals your toy or doesn't share, and effective ways of dealing with that are non-violent, non-aggressive methods. So, really the onus of responsibility is on the media in what we're seeing. So that kind of wraps up the slides. The last one I had was just about the homework, which we kind of covered a lot of these, but just wanted to make sure you guys had those remaining notes that I wanted you to get from the lecture, and we will be continuing with our current lecture in memory this coming Monday. All right, thanks everyone.